with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As 3,000 people crossed the Channel in the last 10 days and 500 or so have died crossing the Mediterranean, we ask the question tonight, is mass migration an inevitability? We'll also look at Keir Starmer's pledge for more onshore wind farms. Will that help our energy security or leave us in even greater peril? And yes, it's that story again. When a girl at a school chooses to identify as a cat and a fellow 13-year-old pupil calls her out, she threatened with being kicked out of the school. I find it extraordinary. All of that and much more over the course of the next hour. But first, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Well, the top story this hour, the House of Commons is still debating the report that found Boris Johnson lied over Partygate. I think we can show you live pictures coming from the House of Commons. There they are. Yes, they've been talking about it all day. MPs are deciding whether or not to sanction the former Prime Minister after the Privileges Committee found he repeatedly misled the House of Commons. Number 10 saying Rishi Sunak is skipping this debate because he doesn't want to influence the decision of MPs. We saw the former Prime Minister Theresa May stand up earlier in the chamber today saying the report will be a small but important step in restoring people's trust in politics.
I will vote in favour of the report of the Privileges Committee. I urge all members of this House to do so, to uphold standards in public life, to show that we all recognise the responsibility we have to the people we serve, and to help to restore faith in our parliamentary democracy.
Well, the Metropolitan Police is looking into 3 potential breaches of COVID regulations between June 2020 and May 2021 at Downing Street and at Chequers. That's after the Sunday Mirror obtained video footage apparently showing Conservative staff partying during the pandemic and joking about lockdown restrictions. Again, Rishi Sunak saying he doesn't want to get involved and interfere with matters. Now, we have some breaking news coming to us here at GB News. A British man is believed to be among those aboard a submarine that's gone missing in the North Atlantic Ocean on its way to view the wreckage of the famous Titanic. We understand the US tour firm OceanGate has confirmed one of its vessels and crew are missing in the ocean. And a man certainly posted on social media in the last few days asking for prayers for his stepfather. That person has been named by relatives as Hamish Harding. And we understand the businessman and pilot wrote on his Instagram account yesterday saying he would be taking part in a dive today, going down to see the Titanic wreckage. That's all the news we have on that so far. We heard earlier on that the US Coast Guard told GB News it is involved in a search. We're expecting developments on that search throughout the rest of the evening. We'll bring them to you here on GB News. Now, police have broken up an Albanian gang that allegedly brought migrants into the UK on small boats. 3 members of the crime group were arrested early on this morning by officers from the National Crime Agency. And if you're watching on television, you can see those pictures right now. Well, GB News understands the group has been charging migrants more than £7,000 a crossing. And lastly, King Charles has attended his first service for the Order of the Garter as monarch. And thousands of people gathered outside Windsor Castle to catch a glimpse of His Majesty alongside Queen Camilla at St George's Chapel today. The Prince and Princess of Wales also in attendance. 800 guests were invited today, but conspicuous by his absence, the Duke of York not there, despite being a member of the Order of the Garter. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. 2 weeks ago today, Rishi Sunak was in Dover saying, "My pledge to stop the boats is working as the numbers are down." I made the point that was because of a northeasterly wind and nothing to do with any policies that have thus far been put in place. And so last Monday, I went back into the channel, and we were the first broadcast media outlet to go back into the channel this year, and we took footage which we showed to you. Well, the result of all of this is that 3,000 people have crossed the channel over the course of the last 10 days. And from Wednesday of this week onwards, it's going to be flat calm for perhaps up to a week. So we can expect another 2, 3, 4,000 to come over that period of time. But there is an even bigger issue and bigger problem. And this weekend, we're focused on a tragedy. And that is a migrant boat coming across the Mediterranean has sunk. It is suspected that up to 500 people are dead or missing. 100 of them children or infants. And it's really, I think, taken some big headlines over the course of this weekend to make people think, well, this is awful, it's terrible, and the blame game is going on. Did the Greek Coast Guard do enough? Why were other commercial vessels that were in that part of the Mediterranean, why were they not alerted to the fact that for many, many hours, this boat, this fishing boat, was basically motionless? And you see a picture of it there on your screens, crammed with hundreds and hundreds of people. So there is a very big blame game going on, but I think they're all wrong. And bear in mind that those that cross the English Channel nearly always are those that previously have crossed the Mediterranean. But I think to blame the Greeks is crazy and it's wrong. I'll tell you where the blame lies. In 2015, when the first boats started crossing the Mediterranean, Jean-Claude Juncker, who was in charge of the European Commission, put in place the EU's refugee and asylum plans. They basically said that anyone that sets foot on EU soil could stay. And I said at the time, and I said it again and again in speeches in the European Parliament, if you allow this policy to go forward from here, there will be millions of people that come. And I said, many, many people will die as a result. Well, since all of that started and the first boat started to arrive in 2014, it is estimated, and wait for this, it is estimated that 27,000 people have drowned in the Mediterranean. That is a truly horrendous figure. And it puts the 500 that have been lost over the course of this weekend into, I think, some sort of context. The main reason people are moving across the Med is because they're coming from poorer countries to rich countries. But if the qualification for refugee status, for claiming asylum, is because you come from somewhere that's poor, then by my reckoning, somewhere between 4 and 5 billion people in the world would qualify. Now, doesn't mean they're all going to come, but it does mean that unless we rethink all of this, we could be facing a problem that literally totally engulfs the European continent and, in turn, us as well. So is mass migration an inevitability? Give me your thoughts. Farage at gbnews.com, because this is a major, major international issue. My feeling is that the richer European countries simply can't take unlimited numbers of people. And we have to get to a point, and we've seen some of this, where the Greeks have been doing pushback, and in Italy, some people have been arrested, put in handcuffs, and sent back to North Africa. Europe is going to have to do, and we too are going to have to do, what the Australians did, and to say, actually, to qualify as a refugee, you genuinely have to be in fear of your life and your liberty as a result of who you are or what you believe in. Poverty, I don't think, is enough. I'm joined by Nigel Nelson, GB News senior political commentator. Nigel, 3,000 have come in the last 10 days. Next week, I can confidently predict, be another 3,000. The legislation that is slowly going through Westminster, I mean, nothing is going to change this side of the autumn, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, the Rwanda thing, that even if it gets through the courts, it's not going to take off until at least September. And what we're seeing is that it's good weather that always makes people cross the channel. So as long as the weather stays OK, you'll see more and more people coming across this summer.
Difficult one for Rishi. He's put this big pledge, stop the boats, the speech in Dover.
An absolute pledge, stop the boats.
Stop the boats, yeah, not reduce the numbers, stop the boats.
Yeah, which is extraordinary.
Not a cat's chance in hell of that, I wouldn't have thought. Labour's position on this, I mean, Corbyn was just remove all barriers and we're all citizens of the world. I'm not quite sure where Starmer is on this.
Well, I mean, they need to go further, but at the moment the Starmer view is that you get the backlog down of asylum seekers, which is really important. You also have proper settlement schemes. He also talks about the idea of disrupting the smuggling gangs. Well, in fairness, so does Rishi Sunak. So that is actually happening. But the idea would be that I think that the most interesting one, which Labour have not fleshed out yet, is a proper settlement scheme. Unless you are Ukrainian, Afghan, or a Hong Konger, there is no legal route to come to this country. And you're absolutely right in what you just said. Being poor is not a good enough reason to claim asylum. You have to be in genuine fear of your life or your safety.
Yeah, and of course, you know, what we get is a fraction of what the continent of Europe is seeing, and numbers into Italy so far this year have trebled. I mean, that's my debate tonight. Is mass migration inevitable, or can the European nations stop it?
Well, I mean, I think that it's a global problem. It's not just even Europe, but Europe dealing with it. We're talking about 100 million people are on the move throughout the world. Now, of those, about 40 million are internally displaced, so they're not actually trying to get to other countries. But every refugee starts out as an asylum seeker, although not all asylum seekers are refugees. So it's important to work out which is which. If you take it as a global problem, I think that it should be people should be taken from UN settlement camps rather than have to cross the Channel to apply for asylum.
Or the Mediterranean, for that matter.
Yeah, wherever they're coming from. But if there is somewhere, at the moment, the asylum law says that if you want to claim asylum, say in this country, you have to be on British soil. That encourages people to cross the Channel.
Now, this all links in, of course, both illegal immigration plus the huge numbers of legal migrants coming to Britain, and we've discussed before school places, we've discussed before the problems with getting GP appointments, etc. I'm going to speculate later on in this hour that water is the next major problem that we face. No big reservoirs built for 30 years, parts of Kent and Sussex running out of water. But housing, another sort of conservative Rishiite pledge that we hear over the course of the weekend, that Britons will be prioritised for council housing because the waiting list is now 1.2 million. Frank Field, former Labour MP, has said the number of migrants being put in council housing is an absolute scandal. Do you think they'll actually do it?
Well, I mean, the first thing to do is actually build houses, because that would deal with those social housing waiting lists that you mentioned of 1.2 million there. I mean, that's disgraceful. I mean, I do think that Brits should be prioritised in principle, but also you take it in terms of need. I think that's the other point there, that it's no point putting a couple in a 6-bedroomed house.
Sure.
If you happen to have a migrant family who've got 6 kids and you need that 6-bedroom house. There's one near where you and I both live, where a Syrian family were put in because the council hadn't been able to let the house for a year. It was a 6-bedroom house. They didn't have anyone suitable to move in. There was an outcry locally when Syrian refugees moved in. Now everyone's happy. So need is actually an important part of it, but it doesn't mean, I mean, if you're sitting on the housing waiting list for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, those are the people who should go to the top of it.
Nigel Nelson, thank you very much indeed. I'm joined down the line from Westminster by Lloyd Russell-Moyle, Member of Parliament, Labour, of course, for Brighton, Kemp Town and Peacehaven. Lloyd, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Rishi Sunak, you know, this big pledge of stop the boats, and he's in a bit of trouble over this, with 3,000 coming in the last 10 days. I've got to ask, what would Labour do about this?
Well, I think you've heard there a bit about Labour would ensure that there are some safe and legal, legitimate routes for people to come. And it does then mean you can be quicker in sending people back when they've either already applied and failed, or that you have the capacity then in country to send them back. One of the big problems that we have at the moment is people come over on the boats and then they might languish for a year or even longer to get a decision made on their behalf. And in that time, they have, of course, built up a claim for family life and for life in the UK. And, of course, wouldn't we all be able to do that if we stayed for somewhere for over a year? So it needs to be justice, but it needs to be quick. And that's what Labour will focus on. And that's not just about speeding it up here, but that's about giving proper processes abroad. Because as you've just heard, unless you're Ukrainian, Afghani, or Hong Kong, there is no legal way that someone can come. And there are refugees from all, even the very best countries will have a refugee every now and again, because they will face political persecution one way or another. You know, kind of Edward Snowden in the US is a good example, who had to flee to Russia. You know, there will always be strange and odd anomalies. So you can't have a blanket ban against a particular country.
All right. Well, let's say
you can say broadly certain countries are at more likelihood for creating refugees.
Lloyd, let's say that a safe and legal route was set up, you know, an offshore processing centre, whether it was in North Africa or France or wherever it may be, and we take people through safe and legal routes. And we believe, actually, the motive isn't just poverty. There is a genuine reason why they would qualify for refugee status. OK, granted.
I mean, I think, Nigel,
but if we do, hang on, just one second. If we do that,
of economic migration, which we should allow, but it should be on different criteria.
Lloyd, if we do economic migration, there are 4 to 5 billion people that would qualify to come to Britain and Europe.
On
it is literally impossible.
Which is our need, which is based on our need. Yeah.
Well, our need, at the moment, our need is to reduce numbers, not increase them. But that's fine. OK, I'm assuming the Labour government has set up safe and legal routes for genuine refugees. Right, I'll take that as a given for the purposes of this conversation. What then happens if people keep coming across the Channel in small boats? What does Labour do then?
Well, first of all, we believe that it would reduce the numbers, and that's the evidence where in Australia, for example, safe and legal routes were set up through Asian countries and processing centres offshore were created and boat numbers dropped dramatically. But the second part of that was important is that people were processed very quickly. So when they arrived, they were either already were on the system, so were turned back to the last country that they came from, or in the case where they hadn't been, they were processed enormously quickly and a judgment was made for where they could reside. That's how you stop the push and pull factors. Let's be honest, though, the number of people irregularly crossing the Channel, and I mean by boat crossing, by hiding in trucks, by going on the Eurostar, etc., is actually lower than it has been previously. It's just that we've clamped down on the other routes, and now the boat crossing is almost the only route left.
Well, I'm not sure about that. There are plenty of reports of people jumping out of lorries, but we have made it tougher. That is for certain. There are lots of Labour voting families who've got, kids, grandkids on council house waiting lists. 1.2 million across the country. An idea thrown out by Number 10 overnight that British people should get put to the front of the list. I can't see with human rights legislation that British people would ever get put above those that have crossed the channel.
Well, my understanding is that they are at the moment. I remember tackling this when I was a local councillor on the housing committee.
Yeah.
And we had very clear criteria that if there were...
I've lost him. Right, I've lost him. Well, OK, we've lost Lloyd Russell-Moore. The link's gone down. I was going to put to him the point that former Labour, long-term Labour MP Frank Field says it is a scandal, the number of council houses that are being given to migrants. Anyway, in a moment, we will discuss onshore wind. You see, Starmer wants to reduce all of this. He wants onshore wind to be our big new future. Is that the right decision? And is it, what will it do for energy security in our country?
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, is global mass migration inevitable? That's the question they asked you, and some of your responses coming in. Ryan says no, it is a symptom of weak government. It's about time we had a minimum 5-year moratorium on immigration. And by that, I think Ryan means all forms of immigration, which would be rather difficult to do. One viewer says, yes, mass migration is inevitable, going by how the current batch of politicians are running the show. Another says, I think you will find it is all planned. To make excuses, they cannot stop it due to some legal paperwork. That is actually for the birds. We were not born yesterday. This is deliberate and cruel against the people of Europe and the USA, and there are a great number of people who do say that. Now, Keir Starmer today, a big speech in Edinburgh in which he pledged to throw everything at net zero. Yup, and he's going to fire the starting gun on a race for us to build more onshore wind turbines. Allied to that, no new gas or oil exploration in the North Sea. The setting up of Great British Energy, a new publicly owned company. Gosh, not so sure about that given the history of state-owned firms. But Starmer emphasises that his plans go way beyond the climate crisis. He says his plans have the potential to create jobs across the country and to improve UK's energy security. Well, I have to say, that last point, I think, is complete and utter nonsense. The more we rely on wind, the less energy secure we are. Sean Spears joins me, who is Executive Director of the environmental think tank and charity, the Green Alliance, formerly, some years ago, a Labour MEP. But also, Sean, you were, of course, running the Council for the Protection of Rural England many years ago. I want to put this to you. As somebody who has fought as hard as you have over many, many years to, keep our wonderful green and pleasant land as it ought to be, full of, great biodiverse species, to keep our uplands looking beautiful. Surely, Sean, whatever your green credentials, you must think a huge outbreak of onshore wind farms is bad for the countryside.
Well, Nigel, I love our Bluebell Woods, and we've got to do something about climate change. I think onshore wind in the right place through the planning system. I don't like this gung-ho rip-up planning, but the evidence is that if you work with communities and locate it in the right places, then people actually get behind it, and particularly community ownership of wind farms, rather than somebody saying, I'm the guy from the energy company, you're going to have a wind farm, we're going to make a big profit, like it or lump it. There needs to be a new dialogue on how we get onshore wind.
Well, that all sounds well and good, Sean, but I mean, I'm speaking to you from Rochester in Kent. Take the Romney Marshes. A wind farm was put up there a few years ago. Virtually every local councillor, MP, MEP, virtually all apart from one who was a Green, objected to it being built, and local communities don't get behind these, and so what happened was there was a compulsory purchase order. And not only are they ugly aesthetically, but they kill huge numbers of bats, birds, and goodness knows what else. Is this really surely if we wanted a green solution, we would be going for new, smaller types of nuclear energy.
Well, I think Keir Starmer's speech today is absolutely right. You've got to throw everything at this, and climate change is really, really serious. You've just had a piece on immigration. One of the drivers of immigration and asylum seeking is, of course, climate change. You've got huge investment around the world in the green transition, $370 billion, $1.7 trillion, conceivably up to $1.7 trillion by the US. Massive investment in the EU. If the UK is left behind, we not only lose out on our contribution to climate change, where we've been world leaders, we lose out on all the job opportunities. And I think you can work with communities to get them to back wind farms. The big difference, Nigel, from when I was running CPRE 6 years ago, is there was a lot of stuff there saying that they were very expensive and they didn't work. And almost nobody now thinks that. The evidence is clear. They're the cheapest form of energy, and they make a big contribution.
No, they're subsidised by taxpayers. But moving on from wind, no new oil and gas exploration.
Well, oil and gas is subsidised massively.
Now, that means a huge loss of jobs in Scotland and elsewhere. We will still be using oil and gas probably for several decades to come. And everything that Starmer is doing here, reducing our ability to be self-sufficient, leaving us vulnerable to intermittent wind energy, meaning in short times we have to import electricity from France or from Norway or from Belgium or whatever it is. I mean, surely his claim that by doing all of these things, he will improve the UK's energy security, surely that is utter rubbish.
Well, if Labour's policy is to decarbonise the grid by 2030 instead of 2035, and it's also to insulate loads of houses, a mass programme of insulation. So if they get those things right, then we'll need less imported gas. But the fact is that the oil and gas we produce in the North Sea is exported on international markets. 80% of the oil is exported, 60% of the gas, and it's a really declining gas field, is exported. Unless you are proposing state ownership, which from your previous comments, I guess you're not. No. We are paying as taxpayers huge sums of money to the developers of these oil and gas fields, and then we export the gas and the oil on international markets.
Well, I promise you, Sean, I promise you, we could find the capital in about 3 days to develop the gas fields in the northwest of England, the Bowland Reserve. There's plenty of private capital that would come for these things. All I'm saying to you is this. Even if we're worried about the climate crisis, all we've done for the last 20 years is put huge levels of subsidy onto consumers' electricity bills. We have exported manufacturing jobs, and yes, of course there are some jobs on the wind farms and everything else, but we've exported a huge number of manufacturing jobs. We've left ourselves utterly reliant on imports. I mean, and we only contribute less than 1% of global CO2. It's all well and good being world leaders, but it's an act of self-harm, isn't it?
Well, even if you leave climate change aside from it, if we hadn't cut the green crap, as David Cameron said 8 years ago, we would have invested an awful lot of money in insulating our houses. We would have invested in a more flexible grid. We'd be in a much better place to generate our own clean British energy for British people than instead of being reliant on imports as we have been from Russia and Ukraine. And the sooner we get on the transition, which is happening, like it or not, this is like a new industrial revolution, the better position we'll be in. Otherwise, we'll be left in a kind of 20th century fossil fuel economy where the rest of the world is moving on and decarbonising.
And what happens in Sean Spears' world when the wind doesn't blow?
Well, Energy UK and all the boffins reckon that you can deal with that through storage, through limited backup. Nuclear is a part of that. Well, Energy UK is the representative group for the energy companies. They're absolutely confident. Other countries are investing in this big time.
Of course they're confident. They want all the competitors forced out of the industry. Sean, when it comes... I've been hearing about energy storage on a big scale for a quarter of a century, and if it happens, I'll give 3 very big, loud public cheers. But frankly,
you have to have a mix, Nigel. You have offshore, onshore, solar. You insulate the houses. You manage demand, and you do have some backup. And it's evident. It is evident that it can be done.
We'll need to import.
People denying it now.
We'll need to import when the wind doesn't blow. Final quick thought: should houses have heat pumps?
Yes.
Okay.
And they're very popular, and there's only one way we're going. We have to get off fossil fuels, both for the economy and for the climate. And so heat pumps
any house
will come down in price in the future.
Any house over 50 years old will not be suitable for a heat pump. It'll cost them 10 to 15 grand. And just one final thought on fossil fuels. This year, the world's going to burn 8 billion tonnes of coal. We're going to burn more coal this year than in any year in the history of humankind. Aren't we just deluding ourselves that we make any difference at all?
Well, no, I think the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, everybody else, the International Energy Association, there's a clear pathway for getting off fossil fuels. It's not impossible. The economy rests on it. And I think what you're forgetting about in your sort of derision about heat pumps is innovation. These things will become cheaper as offshore wind is immeasurably cheaper than anybody thought was possible 10 years ago. Heat pumps will become cheaper. They'll become more efficient. We can do this stuff. You've got to get on board, Nigel. You'll love it.
Well,
the green future we're building.
Sean, I promise you, you know, as a big supporter, as you know, of much of your work at CPRE, yeah, I'm an environmentalist, but I'm a pragmatic environmentalist. When these things can work without subsidy and with 100% reliability, and when we're self-sufficient, then you may find a bit more enthusiasm from me. For the moment, forgive my scepticism and thank you for coming on the show again. Sean Spears, thank you very much. So, extraordinary. In West Kent and East Sussex over the course of the last week, houses have either had very, very low water pressure or in many cases, no water at all. Is this the next really big crisis we as a country could face?
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
News channel.
Well, March was the wettest March in the southeast I can ever remember. But since then, and actually since the coronation, apart from this weekend, it's barely rained at all. I haven't seen the grass as brown as this in June. Not that I can remember, certainly in my lifetime. And Southeast Water have brought in an immediate hosepipe and sprinkler ban. This is the earliest time they've had to do it for over a decade. We're told by Southeast Water that the problem is that demand for water has broken records. So it isn't just about the fact that it hasn't rained very much. And it isn't just about the fact that no major new reservoirs have been built for about 3 decades. No, demand for water has broken records. Anybody at home got a clue as to why that should be? Well, travel around the southeast of England and what you'll see is house building on a scale that is almost unbelievable. It is part of the population crisis engulfing this country. And I'm beginning to wonder whether water may become a very, very serious problem, because from start to finish, to build a new reservoir is probably going to take you about 10 years. Now, the area that's been worst affected has been West Kent and East Sussex, and indeed, some places have had no water at all for days. Schools have had to close, and we're told, though, it has, at least for now, engendered a bit of a blitz spirit. And I'm joined now down the line by Councillor Michael Lunn, who is Conservative Councillor for Hadlow Down and Rotherfield on Wealdon District Council. Councillor Lunn, thank you for joining us. Just tell us what's been happening over the last week or so in your area.
Well, thank you, Nigel. It's been an absolute mess of a situation. Residents have been out of water for 8 days, 4 schools closed, businesses closed, farmers, animals, equestrian folk without any water. And it's just been ongoing with very few communications coming out of South East Water. And quite frankly, people have been very resilient, a real community coming together, but they're tired, they're fed up, and they want answers of why this has happened yet again. This is the 4th time this has happened.
Yeah, no, as you say, it was happening last year to some of these communities. I mean, do you see my point, Michael, about house building? You know, huge increase in population in Kent, Sussex, Hampshire, many of these southern counties. I mean, do you know of plans to build new reservoirs? I mean, there's one proposed over the border near Canterbury, but I mean, what is East Sussex doing in terms of planning for the future?
Well, the issue about, you talk about reservoirs, we actually had a briefing not so many months ago from South East Water talking about the Arlington Reservoir, which you'll be familiar with.
Yep.
And they've got no plans to complete that until 2040 or 2050. Yet the house building is ongoing.
Yeah.
And the major issue is that South East Water and Southern Water that deal with sewage are not statutory consultees to the National Planning Policy Framework. And therefore, when you ask them as a planner, as a councillor, as an officer of the council, can we hook up these new houses that are being planned? Their immediate answer is yes. And you've got no opportunity to challenge that because they are seen as the experts. And the whole system is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, it's flawed at every level, actually, isn't it? As you say, supply of water to houses, sewage leakages into the sea and some of the beaches in southeastern England. And yeah, it's a mess. Michael, thanks for coming on and sharing some of your experiences and observations. And I hope the situation gets better for you quickly. I worry that it won't necessarily do that. Thank you. When you think about it, I mean, water, it is the most basic of all commodities for life, but for settlements. You know, in the early days, where did man build places to live where they could get water? And now, here we are in the 21st century, and supposedly one of the richest countries in the world, so badly managed, so badly organised, that we have, folks, believe me, you heard it here first, there will be, over the next few years, a major water crisis coming down the tracks. And they'll tell you it's about global warming. They'll tell you it's about climate change. Actually, it's about the population explosion. Now, when not drinking water, of course, beer is a very good option. And my What the Farage moment today on that is that extraordinarily, we have breweries. And, you know, big brands like Foster's, but also well-known household bottled bitters. And craftily, what the brewers have done is to reduce the alcohol content of the beers so that they pay a lower duty. That's how it works. Spirit manufacturers obviously paying the highest level of duty. So it is called drinkflation. And I think it's a bit of a scandal. Goodness me, they're watering down the beer, whatever. Next. Well, The real What the Farage moment is Wickes. Yes, the household store, and you go there, it's a builder's merchants, but we often go there ourselves, don't we, to buy a paintbrush or whatever it may be. And their chief operating officer, Fraser Longdon, has said that trans-critical shoppers are not welcome to branches of Wickes, which kind of means that unless you think it's fine for a bloke to say he's a woman and then win a swimming contest or a cycling contest, you can't go shopping in Wickes. Well, we decided we'd do something about it, and GB News' Joe Casper went to the Muswell Hill branch of Wickes to ask customers whether they'd shop at the DIY store again.
No, I wouldn't. No.
Silly thing to say, really, isn't it?
You would shop there again?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Quite happily, yeah?
Yeah, I'm not a bigot. I've got no problems either way.
I think twice before I do shop there.
Yeah.
Everybody has a place.
No, of course I wouldn't shop there, no. Everyone is equal and everyone should be allowed everywhere.
By him to just comment on these sort of matters, he's like in a building game. He should, do you know what I mean? Not really his opinions, you know what I mean? He's just keeping to himself, really.
Look, I don't think shops or anybody should get into those ideas. I mean, I actually believe that women are women, and I've got no problem with trans people at all, but I think we have to be quite clear, you know, the difference between a woman and let them be in a safe space. Yeah.
You wouldn't shop at Wickes?
Probably not, if it felt like that. I mean, I welcome anybody who's gay, trans, anything. But I think people are allowed their own opinions and should be able to express them and not feel they have to shut up.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. The last person we spoke to there said women are women. Gosh, that wouldn't go down very well in certain quarters now, would it? No, not in 21st century Britain, and not absolutely. And it's sort of turning out tonight to be a bit of a southeast special, because we're going to go back to East Sussex, where a huge row has broken out over a school in Rye. And it was all over one of the kids wanting to identify as a cat. And apparently that's absolutely fine, according to the teacher, and a 13-year-old that questioned it was threatened with being kicked out of the school. I know it sounds mad. It's not April the 1st. I promise you, we'll do that story in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But bomb.
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It was a Church of England school in Rye, East Sussex, a rather beautiful little old medieval town. But yes, at Rye College, a 13-year-old and her friend have been in real trouble, actually threatened. We're being told they might need to move schools. Have a listen to this transcript of a teacher and a 13-year-old talking about gender identity.
How dare you? You've just really upset someone. Saying things like should be in an asylum.
I didn't say that. I just said if they want to identify as a cat or something, then they're like genuinely unwell. Yeah, they're crazy.
You were questioning their identity.
No, I wasn't a question. I was just saying about the gender. I haven't said anything about them.
But where did you get this idea from? There's only two genders.
I just said my opinion.
You were talking about the fact that cisgender is the norm. That you identify with the gender, with the sexual organ that you're born with, or you're with. That's basically what you're saying, which is really despicable.
Well done to that 13-year-old girl for standing up to that bullying, hectoring teacher. And it all happened because one of the girls in the class wants now to identify as a cat, which the other students said they thought was absolutely crackers, and she perhaps wasn't well in the head. Well, how can you be well in the head if you want to identify as a cat? This whole thing is crazy. And actually, those who preach tolerance are now becoming the most intolerant people of the lot. Threatening a 13-year-old that perhaps it wasn't the right school for her is extraordinary. Well, I'm joined down the line by Debbie Hayton, who is a transgender teacher and Spectator columnist. Debbie, I was very amused by a comment that you made, which was along the lines of, mathematics to 18's one thing, but we're having a bit of trouble with biology. Why was that teacher, Debbie, so intolerant?
Well, people have taken on all sorts of odd ideas, Nigel. We've got children in schools who are identifying as cats, and really we should be helping these children understand themselves that they're not a cat, they're a human being.
Yes, yes, of course, that's right. But why is it... Oh, have we lost the line? Hang on. Yeah, why is it that anybody, in this case the 13-year-old, anybody that stands up... I mean, surely teaching... I mean, you're a teacher. Surely teaching is about encouraging debate among young people, open, healthy debate. What seems to be going on is we're shutting down debate and we're saying to young people, this is what you must think, and anybody that questions it better leave the school.
Yes, this is not tolerance, this is intolerance, this is setting down ideas, and if you do not follow these ideas, then you're a despicable person. The fact is that these really strange ideas have taken root in education, and teachers really ought to know better than to propagate it. But as teachers, what we're really struggling with is a lack of guidance from above. Schools are often making policy up. We've been waiting for guidance from the government for quite some time. It has been promised now, but the fact is that we are not given the guidance that we need, and that teachers have just gone completely astray on this idea.
Yeah, I mean, what Sunak has said over the course of the last few days is that children should not be able to change their gender identity without the parents knowing first. And that sounds to me like good common sense. Parents ought to be part, absolutely, of this equation. But if it's given, Debbie, in just the form of guidance, you know, my concern is there are parts of the education system that have been so overtaken by the radical left that they simply won't listen.
Well, some people won't listen, but people who have still got some grip of reality will at least have a document which gives them the confidence to stick up their hands and say, we think there's something wrong here. But even the comments which you reported then from the Prime Minister is establishing this idea that children do have a gender identity. And even that is conjecture. It's an idea which is very new, is gender identity. Nobody needs a gender identity. And even to be actually explained, even to suggest the idea is establishing this as a fact. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah, no, Debbie, so do I. And thank you very much indeed for joining me down the line to discuss this today. And I very much hope that this 13-year-old is able to stay at Rye College. I really do. Now, it's been a busy day down in Westminster because, of course, Parliament has been debating. Yes, of course, it's the report into Boris Johnson, and even though he's gone and he's not in Parliament, there's been a debate, and I wonder whether there's actually going to be a vote. So Jacob Rees-Mogg is still there in Parliament, working away. I'm going to hold the fort here over the course of the next hour, but Jacob will pop onto your screens as often as he possibly can. Jacob, what's the news, and will this Privileges Committee report go to a vote this evening?
I expect there will be a vote, but it'll be a fake vote. That is to say, the Labour Party will vote and very few Conservatives will. Most Conservatives will abstain. This process has not been a fair one. It hasn't treated Boris Johnson reasonably. And if you read the report, they just jump to conclusions without having evidence for it. That's what people have been saying in the debate. People like me and other MPs have been pointing out some of the routine errors in the report.
Yeah, but, Jacob, I made the point to you, there were 4 Conservative MPs on this committee.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There were 4 Conservative MPs on the committee, but the report is always drafted by the chairman of the committee, and I tried to get across the point to Harriet Harman herself that she should have followed the Hoffman principle and recused herself. She should have stood aside because she was seen to be partial. She said some government minister had said it was all right for her to do it, but she didn't say who, so that rather leaves the question up in the air.
Well, Jacob, we'll find out what the result of all that is later. You'll be joining us over the course of the next hour, live from Westminster. I'll be back at the top of the hour, but for now, let's have a look at the all-important weather.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Today's showers, where they have occurred, will ease for a time overnight, turning drier in the north, but further south, that's where the next area of rain or even some thunderstorms turns up overnight. This weather system coming out of the continent will push up some heavy and persistent rain by midnight into southern areas, whilst further north the rain clears and the showers disappear, so that Scotland, Northern Ireland, much of northern England sees dry and clear weather overnight. But across southwest England, South Wales, that's where the heaviest and more persistent rain will be by dawn. Temperatures here, though, held up because of the muggy air. 16, 17 Celsius in places first thing, but a wet start for Wales, the southwest, and then some heavy showers appearing for southeast England through the morning as well. All of this moves quickly northwards, so it does dry up in the south, whilst northern England, southern Scotland turns damp by the afternoon. Away from the main area of rain, it's sunny spells and heavy downpours. Hit and miss showers, but where these do occur, especially towards east and southeast England, could be some serious thunderstorms, some lightning and some hail, and large amounts of rain in a short space of time. They don't last too long into the evening. By midnight, it looks like most places will turn drier and clearer once again. Despite the clear skies, though, it's another warmer than average night with temperatures in the south staying at the mid-teens, in the north 13, 14 Celsius generally. And it's a damp start for Shetland first thing Wednesday, but otherwise plenty of sunshine first thing, and we'll keep that sunny outlook going into the afternoon, I think, in many places. But showers in Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales will develop fairly widely by the afternoon. Again, hit and miss downpours, odd rumble of thunder or even some hail possible in some of these showers. Some areas will miss them entirely. Thursday, another day of sunny spells and showers, but turning hotter later this week.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, the Sunday Mirror gave us a video of a party that took place at Conservative Central Office during lockdown. But I wonder, which is worse? Them partying whilst the rest of us had to stay at home with the threat of fines, or the lockdowns, 3 of them, that they imposed upon us? Mark Carney, I keep hoping he's gone away, but no, he's back. Yes, and he says inflation is because of Brexit. And joining me for Talking Pints, Princess Gloria, Van Turn and Taxis. It should be interesting. But all of that comes after, oh, and by the way, Jacob will be checking in at regular moments during the course of the next hour. But before that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening. Well, the top story tonight, the House of Commons continues to debate on the report that found Boris Johnson lied over Partygate. Let's take you live to the House of Commons and show you that ongoing debate. MPs are trying to decide today, it's been going on for some hours, whether or not to sanction the former Prime Minister after last week the Privileges Committee found he repeatedly misled the House of Commons. Well, we've heard in the last 20 minutes or so one Labour MP saying, I I've never read a report so damning. And just in the last couple of minutes, one Tory MP says he is so over Boris, while number 10 says Rishi Sunak is skipping the debate because he doesn't want to influence the decision of MPs. Earlier on this afternoon, the former Prime Minister Theresa May said the report will be a small but important step in restoring people's trust in politics.
I will vote in favour of the report of the Privileges Committee. I urge all members of this House to do so, to uphold standards in public life, to show that we all recognise the responsibility we have to the people we serve, and to help to restore faith in our parliamentary democracy.
Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police is looking into 3 potential breaches of COVID regulations between June 2020 and May 2021 at both Downing Street and at Chequers. And that's after the Sunday Mirror obtained apparent video footage purporting to show Conservative staff partying during the pandemic and joking about lockdown restrictions. Rishi Sunak once again saying he doesn't want to get involved with that either in case he interferes with matters. Now, let's just bring you some breaking news detail on that search for a submersible that's gone missing in the North Atlantic. We understand a British man is believed to be among those on board that submarine that's gone missing on its way to the famous Titanic wreckage. US tour firm OceanGate have confirmed one of its vessels and crew are missing in the North Atlantic. And we do know that a man posted on social media asking for prayers for his stepfather, Captain Hamish Harding. We have verified ourselves. The pilot, who owns an aviation company, wrote on his Instagram page yesterday saying he would be taking part in a dive to the wreckage today. Well, that expedition comes in at just under £200,000 a ticket. The US Coast Guard confirming with GB News it is involved in the search. More detail as we get it. Now, police have broken up an Albanian gang that allegedly brought migrants into the UK on small boats across the English Channel. 3 members of the crime group were arrested early on this morning. If you're watching on television, you'll see officers from the National Crime Agency making those arrests. And GB News understanding the group has been charging migrants more than £7,000 a crossing. Lastly, King Charles has attended his first service for the Order of the Garter as monarch. Thousands of people gathered outside Windsor Castle today to catch a glimpse of the King alongside Queen Camilla at St George's Chapel. The Prince and Princess of Wales also in attendance today. 800 guests invited, but conspicuous by his absence, the Duke of York was not there, despite being a member of the Order of the Garter. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We'd seen a picture or two before, but this time it was a video, yes, and it was released by the Sunday Mirror, and it shows a party that took place. It was advertised as a jingle and mingle Christmas party, this during the Christmas when we were not allowed to visit our families or have them come and visit us on pain of fines. And this was all getting ready for Sean Bailey's campaign to be the Mayor of London. And attending the party, we don't know whether they were still there at the time. Perhaps they were drinking and were dancing, but Sean Bailey, of course, who's now off to the House of Lords, Ben Mallet, who's just received an OBE. And there is a hell of a hue and cry going on over this over the course of the last couple of days. And quite right too, because it is just absolutely outright hypocrisy that the rest of us were being terrified by government adverts, told we couldn't live anything like a normal lives or have a normal family Christmas whilst they were partying away. Some would defend it and say that many of these people worked together in a bubble, but not all of them did by any manner of means. There were people that went into Conservative Central Office to attend that bash. But amidst all this anger, what's worse? Is it them partying away while the rest of us couldn't enjoy our Christmas? Or is it actually the lockdown that their government were responsible for? And I say that because we've seen the photographs of this event already. Yes, the video's shocking, but the really big thing, the successive lockdowns, the massive damage they did to the nation's finances, to the nation's psychology, and indeed, long-term, to the nation's health. Nobody ever seems to have lost their jobs over that. Nobody ever seems to apologise. I'm joined back on College Green by Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob, if it's not Boris Johnson, it's the goings-on in Conservative Central Office. The video's not very pretty, is it?
Oh, no, it's not, and it is very serious. And your point's absolutely the right one. If people who were involved in setting the rules were actually quite flexible about the rules in their own lives, were the rules really necessary? And what I want to see from the inquiry is looking at whether the rules were right, not whether we should have implemented them earlier, whether we should have a tougher lockdown. Why didn't we do what Sweden did? Why didn't we trust people to make decisions for themselves? And you'll rightly say to me, I was a minister at the time, why didn't I do more about it? I made the argument, I tried to persuade Boris that we didn't want further lockdowns. I tried to get the House of Commons back. I was always saying that MPs had a duty to democracy ahead of hiding away. But I didn't always win the argument. Indeed, I mainly lost the argument.
Yeah, and you've been busy defending Boris Johnson in the House of Commons today. We're going to see a short clip, Jacob, of your speech from earlier on.
Paragraph 83 decides as if it were an Elon Musk particle to insert itself in the brain of Mr. Johnson to work out what he must have thought at a particular moment. Well, I'm glad to say that, as far as I'm aware, Mr. Johnson does not have one of these little bits stuck in his brain for the committee's benefit. So when it says that we conclude that Mr. Johnson is unlikely to have been unaware, a sort of obscure use of a double negative to try and impute malfeasance to somebody where they cannot prove it.
Absolutely.
You don't have to kowtow. But for some reason, the Privileges Committee thinks it's in communist China and that we must kowtow.
Well, Jacob, I know you're really one of Boris's biggest supporters, but we also saw Theresa May saying in the House earlier on today, it's important to show the public there is not one rule for them and another for us. And this vote, which will take place later on tonight, it doesn't really mean very much anymore, does it? I mean, Boris is gone, and Jacob, you said a moment ago yourself, it was he ultimately that was responsible for successive lockdowns.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. To criticise Boris Johnson for the lockdowns is fair, is straightforwardly political, and of course he bears responsibility for that. In an exclusive interview he gave to the Junior Chronicle, editor one Peter Rees-Mogg, Boris said that he still thought the lockdowns were right, and I happen not to agree with that. I think the lockdowns were a mistake. But it's very different from saying that to saying that he deliberately misled Parliament. Yes. The evidence just isn't there, and they always try in the report to put the blackest interpretation on whatever he did. And in the clip you showed, I compared it to communist China. I was about to say Kim Jong-un, but they're so touchy about what you say about them that I thought if I compared them to Kim Jong-un, I might get into trouble with them in their next report when they plan to have a go at anyone who's been rude against the dignified and important high and mighty committee.
Well, if I were you, Jacob, I'd be jolly rude about them every single day and keep going. We'll come back to you later in the hour, Jacob. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm very pleased to be joined by Laura Dodsworth, who came to my attention during the pandemic when she read a book called A State of Fear. She's updated that now, and she's the author of Free Your Mind. Laura, you were one of the first people that really put me on to the way in which they were using fear, deliberately using fear, to terrify everybody. And with the leak of the Matt Hancock WhatsApps, where he was literally talking about frightening the pants off people, you must feel justified by saying what you did to some degree.
Yes, well, the book was thoroughly researched. I interviewed advisors very close to government, so There's no sweetness in vindication, but it's not really a surprise. It's fair to say the book's aged well. I agree with everything that... and all credit to you as well for having me on the show back in summer 2021, because I'm sure you didn't agree with everything I was putting forward at the time, but you were happy to have the debate.
No, I didn't agree with everything, Laura, but I was beginning to get a very uneasy sense that something was happening here that was fundamentally undemocratic. It was big government in a form we'd never seen. So, no, I wasn't with you 100% then, but at least I was opening my mind.
Well, we're still talking about Partygate and not lockdowns, which is a point you were basically making there in your monologue. And I do want to bring up 2 points that I feel are being missed in the bigger picture. While people are justifiably angry about the hypocrisy of seeing revellers twirling and tipsy in government and with government friends, that's understandable. It really is. I think there are another 2 points we need to consider. First of all, if you think back to the address that Boris Johnson gave the nation on the 23rd of March, it's very severe, very martial. He told us in no uncertain terms we must stay at home and that the police would have powers to enforce the rules. And that was a speech that was littered with threats of power, penalty, danger and death. Nobody listened to that and was under any illusion that parties were on the table. You know, in my household, there was no 16th birthday party for my son. Christmas was cancelled. Funerals were miserly affairs. Fathers weren't at the births of their babies. People suffered. And so, obviously, it really sticks in the craw to see people having parties.
And that's why people are angry, and they're right to be angry. And I understand that, but it seems to me, Laura, that now that I'm a full convert to what you were talking about all that time ago, it seems to me that this is almost now a smokescreen. Let's pour as much bile and hatred at Boris Johnson and various members of the Conservative Party as we possibly can. And in doing that, and in making lots of noise, let's not have the really big debate about the wrong decisions and how they got made.
Of course, which is much harder. It's harder for people that enacted it, people that followed it. But let's have that debate. So I said I've got 2 points to make. One is, what does it say about the rules if the people in the know were not inclined to follow them? This isn't just about Boris Johnson or the party goers. Think about Professor Neil Ferguson. He earned himself the moniker Professor Pants Down. Because despite warning that hundreds of thousands of people would die, he seemed perfectly content to travel across London to see his extramarital lover. Now, why is that, do you think? Dare I put forward the idea that it's because he understood the risk? All of these people, Professor Pantsdown, the revellers at the party, in a sense, what they were doing was a very reasonable job of assessing their own risk. Because back in February 2020, something that's just not talked about anywhere near enough, is the risk was very understood to be highly stratified by age and different comorbidities such as obesity and other clinical conditions. In fact, the World Health Organization published early reports of the IFR, and they were vanishingly small for under 70-year-olds. Because the government thought we wouldn't follow the rules, they amplified the risk, they exaggerated the risk, and they weaponised fear. But they understood the risk, and that's why they behaved the way they did.
I think that's very logical. Now, David Cameron has been up before Lady Hallett today for the inquiry, and they're trying to pin the blame on him for austerity. But, I mean, were we ill-prepared for a pandemic?
We had pandemic plans and we deviated course from them. If you remember, there was a fantastic interview with Professor Ferguson. I'll drop the pants down bit now, although it is fun. In the Times...
His modelling was disastrous, wasn't it?
It was highly criticised. You know, I'm not a model writer myself, but it was very, very widely, robustly criticised. But he said, we didn't think we could get away with it, because, you know, that's what China does. But then Italy did it, and we thought, oh, we can get away with it. Honestly, they were making up policy on the fly, and that's one thing that we saw from the WhatsApp leaked messages, that politicians were making decisions on the fly. So the first thing is people understood the risk, and yet they were partying. So while... you know, the viewers are probably angry to see that gross display of hypocrisy. The difficult thing to really consider is, well, were those rules necessary? Were they proportionate? Now, this is something that legal minds, scientists, ethicists, and everyone had to live under the damn rules has been pondering ever since. I say no. I said no at the time. Lord Sumption said no on this station. He said it everywhere. So if they weren't proportionate, are all of these fines fair? Now, the second point I'm coming to is that while it's natural to want retribution and justice for those partygoers, how about instead we actually ask for an amnesty for everybody who was made a scapegoat in this
because
whole
some
escapade
people were
and
fined up to £10,000, weren't they?
Yes, they were. Now, if you're angry about people twirling around at a party, how angry are you at the idea of students being fined £10,000 each in Leeds in January 2021 for organising a snowball fight?
Well,
because that happened.
Well, you know what? It's going to be OK, because the inquiry will be over by 2026. I mean, it literally is a complete whitewash. No, I get the point. If people were unfairly fined, maybe they should be, if they're amnested and their money paid back to them.
I would love that. Do you know, if you left self-isolation recklessly, the fine was £4,000.
Yeah.
And at the time, that was equivalent to 16 weeks' salary for people in the bottom fifth of earnings. That is a life-destroying fine. We haven't had fines that high in this country since the Dark Ages. Now, no sane, tolerant, just, compassionate society should tolerate that. So while there is an instinct to see the people at the parties punished, we should instead think about the thousands of people who were given fines for sitting on benches or drinking a cup of tea with their neighbours.
And you had to wear a face mask, you know, walking through a restaurant, but it was OK to sit without the face mask in the whole thing was mad. Laura Dodsworth, you've done a great job with all of this. You were right at the time, and I'm pleased I was half with you back then, but I'm fully with you now. In a moment, we will debate Mark Carney. Yes, remember him, the governor of the Bank of England, the great globalist. I sort of rather hoped he'd gone away and we'd never hear from him again. But no, he's back, saying that inflation is to be blamed on, yes, you've guessed it, Brexit.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, we have inflation in the system, but it's not all the fault of the war in Ukraine. Yes, there are some price shocks, but actually we've been creating far too much money for far too long. Huge increases in the money supply across the Western world have led to inflation. And by some measures, our inflation is worse than other countries. And Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, has stepped in to say, this is because of Brexit. Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? And I'm going to debate that point with two people. I'll put my two penneth in to begin with. We have the highest electricity prices, the biggest green taxes of any country in the West. Is it any surprising that we have inflation that is more than some other European countries? Jacob Rees-Mogg joins me down the line, Conservative Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and presenter of this show, but not... Well, he's sort of half doing it this evening. Now, Jacob, we're used to everything being blamed on Brexit. Does Carney have half a point when it comes to food inflation?
No, none at all. That he was responsible for monetary policy, and he failed in terms of monetary policy. He kept on saying that he would soon tighten it, he'd soon put up interest rates, and he'd reverse quantitative easing. He never did it. He just encouraged quantitative easing to carry on, which set the platform for the high inflation rate that we've got. In terms of food inflation, actually Brexit gives us a real opportunity to lower prices, if only we take it, and remove tariff barriers on food coming from outside the European Union. Because currently we have a protectionist system that doesn't particularly protect British farmers, but it protects Irish farmers and French and Dutch farmers, which is not to the benefit of the British consumer.
OK, I'm joined also by Vicky Price, Chief Economic Advisor to the Centre for Economic Business and Research. Vicky, Jacob makes the point that Carney's just wrong, but Carney seems to really believe strongly that Brexit's had inflationary impacts. What's your view?
Well, first of all, on what Jacob said about quantitative easing and not reversing that in time, perhaps loads of other countries have done exactly that. So if you look at what's been going on in the States, what's been going on in Japan, Japan has done much more than all of us, and inflation is only just about creeping up to 3.5% right now, after decades of just pouring money into the economy. So it's not that. That distinguishes it, I think, from the others. So we have to just look at what is it that makes a difference here. Food isn't the issue either, and I think I agree there with Jacob as well, that there have been big food price increases in Europe as well, and they've had to cope with that too. But I think there are nevertheless issues to do with Brexit, which have to do mostly with the fact that we have got barriers in terms of trade. It's not so much tariffs, but it is much more difficult to bring things in and also to send things out. So, and also, in addition, we have had a shortage of labour. Yes, of course, many more migrants are coming now, but in reality, quite a lot of the sectors where the EU workers were very prominent, such as hospitality, for example, the tourism sector, construction, they have been sort of bled dry of workers, and there's been a real shortage as a result.
And yet, Vicky Price, net migration figures are eye-watering. They're almost 3 times what they were before Brexit.
Yes, but as I said, the people coming in are not necessarily going to do those jobs. It's mainly skilled, high-skilled people who are coming in, which is actually good news in many ways, but quite a lot of the workers who are coming from the EU may have been quite skilled themselves in terms of the education they had, but they were coming to help in areas where the skills were not necessarily needed. So that has gone, which has meant that staff shortages in the UK have been worse than elsewhere. And one of the reasons why wage demands have been greater as well, because, of course, it has been sensed very easily that there is a demand there and it needs to be paid for by whoever it is who's hiring people.
But Carney takes no responsibility for the monetary policy that was put in place, the massive increases of money supply. His successor, Andrew Bailey, was way too slow to raise interest rates, whilst the Fed were raising very quickly. Surely the Bank of England themselves, including Carney, bear some responsibility for not understanding any of this.
It's interesting you say that. Of course, we put interest rates up before the US did. We started earlier. There's the end of 2022.
Much harder.
Yes. Then they came in and started, and of course they are about 1 point higher than we are. It's absolutely true. When you look at what happened in Europe, Europe still had negative interest rates in July of last year, so they did it quite late. So in some ways, we were ahead of the curve from that point of view. So you can't blame the slowness of raising interest rates by comparison to others.
The Eurozone's in recession now, and we're not quite, well, we're going to be, I'm sure. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
You've just made the point that the Eurozone is in recession and we're not, and therefore we are getting economic growth, which almost invariably indicates a higher level of inflation. So that's a key part of it. The monetary policy issue is that we went on expanding the money supply during the COVID period, which extended the excess of money in the system, and that clearly had a link to inflation, and that was actually post-Carney, that was Bailey, but that was a problem of the Bank of England, so you're right to be putting the blame on the Bank of England. And as regards the wage push inflation that Vicky mentioned, well, wages are rising slower than prices, so it can't be wage push inflation at this stage, and wages have been catching up with prices rather than the other way around.
OK, Jacob, thank you very much indeed. I'll give you the final word, Vicky Price, on this debate.
Well, the quantitative easing that took place, of course, the Bank of England was very doing an awful lot of that, and that is indeed correct. But so did the others. We didn't do it differently to others. The US did huge amount of quantitative easing, as did the European Central Bank, as did all the others, as I mentioned earlier. So it isn't that. But it's interesting about wages. First of all, I mentioned the staff shortages that exist in some areas. But I think there has been a different issue which has got very little to do with Brexit, which is really centred around the inflation expectations of people. In this country, we stepped in much later than others to do something about energy costs, for example. We didn't do much about controlling food prices. In loads of countries, there are voluntary or mandatory restrictions on food price increases. That has encouraged people here to think that inflation was going to be very high. You remember at the time of Liz Truss in particular, a bit before, we were talking, before she actually introduced the electricity price guarantee, which is good news in terms of inflation, we were thinking about inflation perhaps going up to 18%, even higher. So, of course, wage demand started piling up.
And green taxes?
Well, that is indeed an issue, but green taxes were there anyway. The question is, did we increase the green taxes? And we didn't. So that doesn't cause inflation.
I suppose when the fuel price went up, it meant transporting food was more expensive. One thing for certain, Vicky Price, this is a debate that never, ever goes away. I remember growing up and the arguments were all about inflation, and hey, it's 2023 and we're back where we started.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed. In a moment, a Guardian headline this morning, a sense of betrayal. Liberal dismay as Muslim-led city bans pride flags. We'll debate that in just a moment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Diversity, that's the key. Yes, absolutely. Let's encourage people to stay as different from each other as they possibly can. Let's not have any ideas about shared common cultures or even any sense of national identity. No, these things are bad. They're old-fashioned. They're no good. They're for the birds. No, let's put through identity politics as many divisions between every group in society as we possibly can. I am, of course, being deeply sarcastic. Well, that's the kind of direction that we have been going in. But it can lead to shocks. And certainly it has in Hamtramck in Michigan, which in 2015 became the first in the USA, the first town in the USA to elect a Muslim majority council. And we were told this was good news. It was completely against the awful, divisive agenda of that dreadful man from New York, Donald Trump. Well, fast forward a few years. And as many of you will know, because you can't avoid knowing, it is Pride Month. Well, they've decided to ban the flag. And the former Liberal mayor of that town says there is a sense of betrayal. Well, if you divide everybody up, don't be surprised if you finish up with no common culture and even more division than you had before. Joining me down the line to debate this is Dr. Carol Swain, author, political scientist and race relations expert from Nashville, Tennessee. Carol, good evening. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. So the Liberals can't live with the consequence of the very thing they've encouraged.
That's right. And if you look at the facts of what took place in that Michigan city, the city is liberal, it's Muslim, and they're saying that the pride flag cannot be hung in public places. And you would think that most American cities, and certainly the U.S. government, would not be hanging the pride flag alongside the American flag or the city flag or the state flag. Because if you celebrate the pride flag in that way, there's also the Christian flag. There is the Black American flag. You go down the list, there's an endless supply of flags. Are you going to treat them all equally?
Well, yeah, maybe then. What we should be encouraging is a sense of togetherness rather than a sense of division. I mean, Martin Luther King, I have a dream that one day my 4 children will be judged not by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. It seems to me, Carol, that we're going in the opposite direction to all of that.
We are, and with Pride Month, Americans are pushing back, and I believe that what the left has done through the Democratic Party is that they have created divisions that did not exist between heterosexuals and homosexuals. We've all lived among members of the LGBT. I don't know about the T part of it so much because that's so prevalent now, but we've all had neighbors that belong to the lesbian gay community. We've lived among them. They have not, asked us to celebrate with special flags, but the activists they are harming it for everyone. And it's happening, with the Black community, with every community. We're being divided. And in America, our nation will not work unless we unify around certain values and principles, not identity politics. Identity politics have become a weapon that's destroying the American nation.
So united under one flag would be the better way for America to go and perhaps give a bit of a lead to the rest of us in the Western world.
I would say so. And, this is so well planned out. It's global and it's meant to destroy societies. And Marxism is at the root. It's all about conflict, division, and destroying nations, not bringing people together. It doesn't help the groups they purport to want to celebrate.
Carol, thank you for joining us, and keep fighting the good fight for common sense and for decency. Thank you for joining us. In a moment, it's a Talking Pint special. I'll be joined by Princess Gloria von Thurn und Taxis. We'll learn a bit about the Bavarian royals and about her wilder younger days.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time for Talking Pints. After all that really, really heavy politics that we've been doing, let's just, well, not exactly let our hair down, but let's relax a little bit. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Princess Gloria. And it's von Thurn und Taxis, which is very difficult for the Brits to say and could easily become part of a British comedy. I'm sorry about that, but welcome, welcome to the programme.
Cheers.
Cheers. Now, Gloria, born into the aristocracy, European aristocracy, of course, as you were. It's funny, isn't it? You know, the First World War, the Kaiser goes, the Tsar goes. I mean, really, European royalty significantly in decline.
Yes.
After that moment, and yet it flourished in this country. Why did it flourish here, do you think?
Because the English were clever enough to hire a German family.
That's a good answer.
And they worked out very well for you. And now with King Charles, you have a very good continuity. And I think what the Chinese have the advantage is that they have continuity, and England has continuity as well. So you really have a great standalone with your monarchy, which is this fact for continuity, which is good for the people and for the ruling class.
No, it's interesting. Now you know, as I say, you're an aristocrat, but there you are, you're in your late teens, you're out having fun, and you meet Prince Johann of Bavaria. Now, he's quite a lot older than you.
Yes.
Like 30 years older than you. And what happens, Gloria? How is it suddenly, you know, at 20, you're going down the aisle to the Prince of Bavaria? What happened?
Yeah, that was really something else, because my husband really enjoyed his life as a bachelor so much that he actually forgot to get married. But he had to have an heir. And I remember very well when I met him that he said to me, you know, I really like you so much, you fit so well, I need an heir. Would you like to have children with me?
But this is an incredibly transactional thing.
It's quite like in aristocracy used to be.
Yes.
It was transactional, and then while if you have sympathy for each other, you learn to love each other. And he was so much fun, and he was so intelligent and so witty, and he was at home all over the world, which of course for me was hugely exciting. And we got 3 children right after one another, and I born the heir. And so the family fortune, the continuity was saved. And so he relaxed finally, and we had a great 10 years together when he then unfortunately passed away much too early.
But didn't you feel rather used in all of this?
No, not really, because as I am also born into an aristocratic family, I always knew that there must be an heir to go on, and continuity is really a very important point in all aristocratic or historical families. That's what you need. You need it to go on, the show must go on, and you need an heir.
So you're very young. You're very young when you get married. 3 kids, very, very young. But during the 1980s, you know, Princess TNT, celebrity, coloured hair, outrageous I mean, basically, you were a punk royal, really, weren't you?
I was, and actually quite admired by the late Princess Diana, because she saw that, and she always asked me what I was wearing, what kind of cars I was driving, and she sort of wanted to grasp some of that freedom and craziness that I had. And I was lucky enough to get to know them both, the couple, and to meet Diana also at Kensington Palace and tell her about my life, and she was very amused by it.
Well, you had a huge amount of fun, and you were constantly in the press, and you were this very, very, very glamorous figure to a lot of people. And I guess that sort of world that you were in, that crossed the Atlantic very much. I mean, you knew a lot of the famous people in the music scene, the art scene in New York as well.
In New York, of course, and in Los Angeles, but also in British pop culture. I just say Mick Jagger is a good friend. And by the way, politically, he's totally on our side. So
he's been revealed on GB News. But you're also, Gloria, you're also an artist, aren't you?
I started painting, yes, because I thought it's always good to be creative. When you get older, you have to either sing or you have to paint to exercise your brain.
Yeah. So all of this is happening. You know, you've got married, got the 3 kids. Then, as you say, Johann dies too early, but you're suddenly, life has to change from the punk party girl who's in London, New York, and wherever she is, and suddenly you're facing huge responsibilities. I mean,
inheritance tax.
Inheritance tax, huge problem.
Yes.
And a castle.
Huge castle.
Regensburg Castle. Tell us about that.
Well, that of course was a shock to me, because when my husband passed, before I never had anything to do with business. I was only the master for the entertainment. And now all of a sudden I face this huge debt with the government, the inheritance tax, and I have to produce cash very quickly. And I was rather young, 30 years old, and I immediately started to take business classes. And instead of working through books, I always presented the real case. And so we went through the real case, and while I was learning about the real case, we were also solving the problems. So that was very good. But then I realized it's really like in a household, only that you have to add some zeros. Yeah. It's like a wife at home. She also looks after the money and she runs the house.
That's interesting. That's how Margaret Thatcher tried to explain her budget to the people, that it's the same principle.
It's the same principle. You have to spend, you can only spend what you have.
But a vast building.
A vast building.
How many rooms?
Well, they say 500, but I've actually never counted it.
So, I did see a quote that it makes Buckingham Palace look like a hut.
No. Well, Buckingham Palace is actually one block. Yeah. And ours is a little bit, it goes more in the direction of Windsor Castle, and Windsor Castle is huge.
Yeah. So you managed to do this, you've managed to turn it around. Yes. And it's now a successful estate.
It's a successful estate. We have 120,000 people visit us every year. Yep. We have a very successful music festival, 10 days in July, and we have a very successful Christmas market, 4 weeks in December until Christmas and beyond now. Which that's very, very good for us. And of course the visitors that go to the castle to look at the history, because the castle has from the earliest time, 11th century till the 19th century, all walks through the history of art.
And the Von Turn and Taxis sort of inventing postal systems under the Holy Roman Empire and all the rest of it. No, amazing stuff. And Gloria, faith has become a major part of your life, hasn't it?
Yes, because of course I was raised a Catholic. Yes. And my parents prayed with us before lunch and dinner, and also when we went to bed. But of course I realized when I was facing really existential problems that I cannot solve this on my own. I need help beyond. And when I got that help, of course, that made me very grateful. And I thought, if I got help from heaven, from God, then I also want to stay faithful and invoke this help through my whole life.
Had you lost that religious faith in those?
No, but as a young person, you take things for granted. And it's really only when you face real problems like a disease or a sickness or your financial or whatever, love, whatever problems you face, and you're really starting to say, oh God, please help me, and you get the help and it really works for you. That's when you become grateful and really faithful.
Interesting. And I wonder, with that faith and belief, and we've met before, and you're always very bubbly and optimistic and fun, and you may not be the wild child anymore that you were. And you've had plenty of experiences in life, good and bad.
Yes.
As of course everyone does.
Yes.
Just that with you and with other people in your position, those happy days and sad days are always lived out in full public view.
Yes.
Which makes dealing with those emotions more difficult. When you look at the world, Gloria, you look at whether it's the rise of China, whether it's some of the trans ideology I've been debating today, whether it's a decline of Christianity in the Western world, and in this country it's collapsing.
Yes.
Under one of the worst archbishops of Canterbury, that's ever been known. But do you look at the world? You've got your children and everything. Do you look at the world going ahead with optimism or pessimism?
No, for me the glass is always half full and not half empty. I'm an optimist, but I'm a realist too. And of course, to lose the Christian faith is a terrific danger for us, because it means that we're going towards a utilitarian society where every human being is just a something, and it loses its whole purpose, a purpose in life. If you're only there to work or to fulfill a duty, that is not what humans are about. Humans are about to fulfill a godly, earthly reason. We have a reason why we are here, and that's much more profound than just going after work and being useful. And only Christianity makes us useful until the end of life.
Yeah, and it's also, of course, the underpinning of everything about the Western world, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, everything, the culture that we've developed.
The charity.
All based on Judeo-Christian culture. Our laws effectively based on the Ten Commandments.
Right.
It does underpin everything.
Yes.
And the West, I think the West faces some enormous challenges, doesn't it?
I think so, and that's why I always say I am so sad I cannot party Pride Month, because pride for us is a sin. It's one of the 7 gravest sins. We cannot be proud. Proud is bad for Christians and also for the Muslims. So. Sorry.
No, I've been debating that with the city of Michigan.
Unfortunately, we cannot join that party.
Well, Gloria, one thing was certain, you always make news, whatever you do, whether it's the colour of your hair, whether it's your strong Christian beliefs causing offence to the woke brigade, and you're just going to go on doing it, aren't you? For year
well, but
year.
Not on purpose.
No, not on purpose, but you'll do it anyway. And thank you for joining me on
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Great stuff. Right, OK, we have got time for a couple of Barrage the Farages, and the first comes from Rummy, and he lives in Streatham in South London.
Hi, Nigel. My name is Rami, and I want to ask you this question. How are you planning to cover the labour shortage that's happening in the UK that's affecting businesses? You have most of the European nationals have left, and I'm just curious, how are you planning to do that? Brexit has happened, and we haven't heard from you ever since the get-go.
Well, that's a load of old... No, I can't say it. It's before the watershed. Rummy, we've got net migration running at 3 times what it was before Brexit. This is not what I voted for. So we have an excess of labour, but we've got millions of people earning unemployment benefit not working. Not working. We can't go on like this. And somebody, at some point in time, is going to have the guts, the real guts to say we cannot go on paying people simply not to work. Certainly not 4 million of them. And I've got time for one more. Darren, who is also from Streatham.
Nigel, my name's Darren. Get together with Boris and you two run this country, mate.
Well, look, you know, Boris and I agreed on the whole Brexit thing. I mean, albeit, I would say he didn't really join the Brexit campaign until about 5 minutes to midnight, but he did. On everything else, we disagree. The rush to net zero and everything else. But his one legacy in life is Brexit. My political legacy is Brexit. At some point, we may have to get together to fight for it. But on every other policy, we're a long way apart. Now, coming up next, it's Dan Woosen tonight.
Nigel, hello. It's very discombobulating, I have to say, to see you at this time. I'm like, is it 8 o'clock? No, brilliant 2-hour show. And of course, we are continuing with the action from the Commons. The vote is expected, the vote on what I believe is the persecution of Boris Johnson. So we will bring you those results. Plus, have you seen, Nigel, Harry and Meghan have been described as effing grifters. Not my words, by the way, by the boss of Spotify. So what is going on with their career and where to now for those two? Plus, Lawrence Fox, you may have seen him all over Twitter over the past 24 hours, why he's so angry with the Pride movement.
Well, he's angry. He set fire to their flag, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I tell you, and that language that was used about Harry and Meghan, I don't know. I'd have been much ruder than that. I really, really would. But before all of that, let's get the all-important weather. Maybe we get some more rain.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Today's showers, where they have occurred, will ease for a time overnight, turning drier in the north, but further south, that's where the next area of rain or even some thunderstorms turns up overnight. This weather system coming out of the continent will push up some heavy and persistent rain by midnight into southern areas, whilst further north the rain clears and the showers disappear, so that Scotland, Northern Ireland, much of northern England sees dry and clear weather overnight. But across southwest England, South Wales, that's where the heaviest and more persistent rain will be by dawn. Temperatures here, though, held up because of the muggy air. 16, 17 Celsius in places first thing, but a wet start for Wales, the southwest, and then some heavy showers appearing for southeast England through the morning as well. All of this moves quickly northwards, so it does dry up in the south, whilst northern England, southern Scotland turns damp by the afternoon. Away from the main area of rain, it's sunny spells and heavy downpours. Hit and miss showers, but where these do occur, especially towards east and southeast England, could be some serious thunderstorms, some lightning and some hail, and large amounts of rain in a short space of time. They don't last too long into the evening. By midnight, it looks like most places will turn drier and clearer once again. Despite the clear skies, though, it's another warmer than average night with temperatures